In the very niche world of medium format folder cameras, there are a couple models that are held particularly high in reverence as well as high in price. One example would be the Falklander Bessa 2. This one is a 6x9 rangefinder camera, and it comes with a multitude of lenses. On one end you have the color Heliar lens, a really popular lens, and with this lens that camera can sell for $500 to $1,000. After that, there's also on the high end, the highest end, the Agfa Isolette lens, and that one is quite rare, quite sought after. Another expensive example would be the Super Icontas, and in particular the 6x9 post-war coated Icontas. Those came with a coated Zeiss Icon Tessar lens, and those can go for about $400 to $700. Also an expensive camera. The last example of an expensive folder would have to be the Agfa Isolette, and in particular the Super Isolette series. This camera was one of the more feature-rich folders of the period, and that came with a automatic film advance, with a coupled rangefinder, full unit focusing, and exceptional lenses, and that can also go for easily $1,000. With that price in mind, I opted for something a little more affordable, and I decided to go with the Agfa Isolette III, which is a rangefinder folder, pretty similar, but has less features. Doesn't have coupled rangefinders, it has an uncoupled rangefinder. It doesn't have automatic film advance, it has a red window to advance, and it also just has a front self-focusing lens as opposed to a whole unit focusing lens. Nonetheless, it's a great camera, very well built, and mine came with a really highly regarded 75mm f3.5 Solinar lens. And I really mean it when I say the 75mm f3.5 Solinar is a legendary lens. It's one of the more highly regarded lenses ever put on a medium format folder, at least in the 1950s, and I was really excited to give it a try. After acquiring my Agfa Isolette III, I did have to go through a few steps until I could actually bring it out into the field. However, these are steps that most owners of these type of cameras will be familiar with. First, I had to actually have the grease in the lens helicoid as well as the rangefinder mechanism replaced. Agfa cameras from this period notoriously have grease that really just solidifies and almost seizes up the entire lens as well as rangefinder. So I had to take that apart, replace the grease, and then also recalibrate everything. After that, the Agfa folding cameras also had a notorious issue with the bellows, where after time you get a lot of pinholes in the corners. This is because they used a artificial material, not like real leather, and this required replacement as well. Fortunately, there are still people who make replacements for these bellows, and it is a little bit of work, but in the end, now I have a camera with really smooth focusing and brand spanking new bellows. So let's just take this out into the field and see how it performs and see if it was all worthwhile to do all this work for such an old folding camera. It was another nice green day along the Sacramento River in Northern California, and I was wanting to take advantage of those gorgeous greens, so I wisely decided to load up some black and white Kodak Tri-X 320. Also, I placed this note on the back of the camera because if you let the front of the camera open on its own, it'll rock it open and actually create a suction effect on the film, which will cause it to be uneven with the film playing. One shot in, and I'm already noticing why this Solinar lens is so highly regarded. Just look at how well this contrast comes out in such a backlit scene. Also, before I get too far into this video, I should mention that the Isolette 3, of course, is not the first Isolette, as you might imagine. And there's actually two sibling cameras, the Isolette 1 and 2. Both are pretty similar to the 3, except they don't have a rangefinder, and they often use lower quality Apotar or Agnar lenses. These also have the same issue with the lens helicoid seizing up as well as the bad bellows. For this shot, I wanted to focus the lens to as close of an object as possible. Typically, this is where front self-focusing lenses and rangefinder mechanisms really seem to struggle. And honestly, with this shot, it turned out okay, although I will say I barely missed the focus and the composition's a little off. This photo ended up being my last shot of the day along the Sac River. Good thing about this little folder though is I can pack away my little fanny pack and wait for the next opportunity to go for a photo walk. That opportunity for another photo walk appeared less than a couple days later when I had the chance just to go for a quick little stroll in my local park. Once again, the greens were popping, but of course, I had black and white film, so it didn't really make a difference. Not gonna lie, I really liked how this shot turned out. The contrast, depth of field, and overall sharpness of this lens allowed me to capture this composition exactly as I had envisioned in my head. At this point in the walk, I actually noticed that some of the helicoid grease had traveled into the internal element of the lens. I'd put a little too much on when I was repairing the camera, so let that be a lesson to really apply this stuff liberally if you're going to do it yourself. As the sun got close to setting and the mosquitoes really started to eat me alive, I figured I'd try and pop up one last photo. Ultimately, I settled on a composition that I've used about 80 other times in the past, but it turned out all right. Well, there you have it, done with my roll of Tri-X 320 out in the field, and overall I'm pretty happy with the results. I think this lens, the 75mm f3.5 Solinar, does a great job with contrast, with overall sharpness, and just really rendering a pleasant landscape, because this is, in my mind, a decent landscape camera. It has the basics of a red window to advance, so there's not much that can go wrong there. It's a really straightforward camera. It's a real breeze to use. With that being said, I am planning on doing a few more reviews for some folders in the future, perhaps one more this summer. If any of you have any suggestions, I'd be curious to find out. You can leave a comment for that. Otherwise, stick around for the next one soon.